Hi everyone, Jacksistential here. Today we are going to be taking a look at the Druze, not the Jews, the Druze. Who are the Druze? They are a smaller minority than the Jews in the Near East. Yeah, so first off, who are the Druze? The Druze religion began in the 10th century, so 900s about, as an offshoot of Shia Islam. They make roughly 3% of the current nation of Syria's population. More than half of the roughly 1 million Druze worldwide live in Syria, in what is called the Golan Heights, which part of it Israel claims. Most of the other Druze live in Lebanon and Israel, including in the Golan Heights, which Israel captured from Syria in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, and annexed totally, I guess, in 1981, and displaced 140,000 Syrians who lived there. Well, I mean, whoever originally lived there probably wasn't Sunni Muslims. Golan Heights are pretty insignificant to the Druze. UN Security Council deemed that annexation null and void and without international legal effect at the time. Not much has changed from said council's statements, I guess. The local Druze in Suwaida, who make up 90% of the region's population, largely expelled the ousted former President Bashar al-Assad's regime and its agents in 2012. After that, they aided neither Assad's government nor the rebels opposing them. Okay, all right, so this discusses the regional violence and now the current disputes with the new Syrian leadership. They feared persecution from several attacks from the Islamic State militant group and al-Qaeda affiliates, the Nusra Front, in the 14 years following the uprising against the regime in Syria in March 2011. While it first appeared many Druze hoped to resolve matters diplomatically with al-Shara, the new Syrian incumbent president, vowing to create an inclusive Syria for all its different ethnic and religious communities, they became more skeptical over time, especially after a February counter-insurgency at the coastal province turned into a targeted attack against the Alawite religious minority. It's well established that the Druze, being distinct in a very distinctive branch from the traditional Shia Islam denomination, which is not in the realm of the Sunni interpretation of Islam. So the Sunnis definitely see the Druze as major heretics, so to say, because as far as we know, the Druze accept the Tanakh, the Torah, the Christian New Testament, the Quran, Plato's dialogues, and along with other esoteric mystical texts which have not been translated because it is forbidden for Druze knowledge to be taught to non-Druze. So they keep their traditions and practices firmly within their faith, and they prefer to have their own laws, at least, and their own sort of autonomy. So the way Israel sees it, the Druze are a smaller minority than themselves in the Middle East, and the enemy of your enemy is your friend, so Israel takes a strong stance to support the Druze. Now, this article that was published about 4 days ago describes the Israel-Druze alliance, offers hope. And this is by the National Post in Canada. The Syrian Druze protest near the Israeli-Syrian border, as seen from the town of Majdal Shams in the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights on Wednesday, amid the ongoing clashes between the Syrian government forces and Druze armed groups in the southern Syrian city of Sweda. So the Druze do have their own flag, and their colors represent, I'm not sure if it's the esoteric symbolism of the colors, but that is their own flag. Very few religions have their own standardized flag. Okay, so over the past few weeks, Israel has demonstrated a remarkably proactive stance towards safeguarding the Druze, both within its borders and across Syria, signaling a dramatic evolution in its role from regional observer to protector of vulnerable communities. This shift is rooted not only in military necessity, but in cultural kinship, moral clarity, and shared destiny with a people who have long sought stability amid the turbulence of the Middle East. The author of this article goes on to say, when I met with the Druze spiritual leader in Majdal Shams, in northern Israel, just a few months before October 7th, referring to the October 7th, I guess, massacre of 2023, there was a sense of optimism in the air. He spoke with hope about the Abraham Accords and the expanding peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. He envisioned a future where normalization might reach Syria and Lebanon. His village, he said, rejected Hezbollah and the chaos it brought to the border. We just want peace and a better life, he told them. At the time, it felt within reach. But his vision was shattered on July 27, 2024, when a Hezbollah-fired rocket struck a football pitch in Majdal Shams. 13 Druze children were murdered, innocent lives lost in an act of calculated terror. The image of blood-soaked soccer fields and grieving families remains smeared into memory. Nearly 1 year later, just weeks ago, Druze civilians just across the border of Sweda, Syria, were massacred. ISIS-affiliated terrorist groups, pro-government militias, and Bedouin militias attacked Druze neighborhoods, killing hundreds, torched homes, raping women, and throwing people from balconies. Some were tortured before being executed, their mustaches shaved in grotesque echoes of Nazi cruelty. The mustache is a very important cultural symbol in Druze culture. It's very important that men have mustaches. Over 1,300 have been killed in the fighting. The brutality echoed the horrors of October 7th. So, at least the missile attack on the Druze community at the time was talked about in the media, not so much the further extent of Druze persecution. Israel, in contrast, responded decisively. The Israeli Air Force launched strikes on Syrian military installations, threatening Druze-populated regions. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz declared that Israel would not stand by while the Druze were slaughtered. Because of Israel's swift military, diplomatic, and humanitarian response, the massacre was stopped. But where was the global outcry in support of the Druze? Good question. Where were the demonstrations in Paris, New York, and Toronto? Where were the Muslim communities and their allies condemning the Syrian regime and demanding the violence end? Where were the Muslim communities and their allies condemning the Syrian regime and demanding the violence end? I mean, the student encampments for pro-Palestine protests were very much a thing. Exactly. Where were the pro-Palestine rallies? The academic unions and church groups who so easily condemned Israel, yet said nothing for the peace-loving Druze. And when it comes to Israel, they become hateful, violent, and disruptive. They build encampments, but for the Druze, silence. It's not concern for human rights. It is selective outrage rooted in anti-Semitism. And even worse, many of these same voices defend or excuse the very Islamist radicals responsible for such horrors. This is an ideology that persecutes women, criminals, homosexuals, suppresses minorities, and abolishes free speech. That's Islam, that's Sharia law. They do not uphold democracy or the freedoms we cherish in the West. Instead, they adhere to a violent, patriarchal, jihadist crusade. Israel stands in total contrast, a liberal democracy protecting women's rights, LGBTQ freedoms, religious pluralism, and the rule of law. So why do so many human rights advocates attack Israel while defending its enemies? That hypocrisy was on display in Sweden, just as it was after October 7th. Meanwhile, Israel delivered aid to Syrian Druze, facilitated religious pilgrimages, and amplified the voices of Druze leaders calling for justice. Israeli Druze citizens have mobilized in solidarity, offering shelter and support to displaced relatives. Religious leaders appealed to Israel, and Israel answered. The Druze have shown unwavering loyalty to Israel, serving among the IDF's fiercest and most honorable fighters. They are known as brave warriors who have defended the Jewish state with courage and pride. That bond demands a moral obligation. Across Israeli society, there is an agreement. When the Druze call for help, Israel must respond. And in a region plagued by betrayal and silence, this alliance stands as a beacon of shared purpose and human dignity. Where others have abandoned the Druze, Israel has stood by them, and in doing so, it has redrawn the moral map, not just in the Middle East, but of the world. So there you have it. The Druze. They are not advocated for very much in the West. Nobody really knows who the Druze are. Nobody knows where you can spot them on a map. Everyone claims to spot Palestine on a map. Everyone claims where Palestine should be on a map, but not the Druze, not the Golan Heights. To praise the current incumbent Syrian president, al-Shara, who is an ex-ISIS fighter, to praise him, a man such as him, beyond misguided. He is not a saint. He is not a savior of Syria. He's not going to be a protector of religious minorities. Anyone with any form of common sense needs to be distrustful of the man. The Druze are very much pro-gender equality. In fact, they have certain medical rules that you can't handle a Druze woman if you are a non-Druze, because a Druze woman's body is holier than holy, in a sense. And Druze women are allowed to own property. They're allowed to be educated. In fact, they are very educated. And many Druze women are professors at universities, and they teach. They speak multiple languages, and they are in stark contrast to Muslim women in much of the world, in much of the Muslim world, who have restricted career options and are oftentimes very much not allowed to teach or be educated. At the heart of it, Israel and the Druze region, the Golan Heights, absolutely are on the same page for human rights and coexistence. That's not the case in the Muslim world. In a future video, we'll talk about specific instances of Islamic intolerance to minorities. In fact, we'll have to look at the whole history of the Muslim world expelling minorities or persecuting or waging jihad, because they still continue to happen in parts of the world, in Russia, Pakistan, Muslim regions in India, Iran is a prime example, and it just creates a world where Westerners root for one group, thinking that they are the victims, when in fact these guys that they're supporting, the Palestinian cause, is simply an offshoot of the all-encompassing Muslim world that surrounds the only humanitarian country in the Middle East that actually protects human rights, women's rights, freedom of speech, and the simple personal freedoms that we take so much for granted in the West. Westerners think that Israel is the suppressor of human rights, that Israel is the instigator of genocide. They say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, if you want Palestine to triumph over Israel and turn Israel into a nation called Palestine with Sharia law in place, that's how it's going to be if you really want that, because Palestine is run by terrorists. They're run on Sharia law. It's not going to be a liberal, plural way of life if Israel becomes Palestine and the Druze become subjects of a greater Palestinian authority. Palestinians will not tolerate the Druze. They will not tolerate the Jews. Israel is trying to maintain a balance of power within its means. That's the way the world works, and that's the way modern geopolitics work when especially religion is thrown in. You need to establish religious alliances. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. See you in the next video.